Good afternoon. Strict border rules have been reimposed to stop the potential spread of the Omicron variant. No local cases of the new strain have been detected, but international travellers arriving in Victoria and New South Wales must now isolate for 72 hours. Mimi Becker reports.
Health authorities aren't taking any chances. In Victoria, all international arrivals are required to self-isolate at home for 72 hours after landing, while those arriving from 9 southern African countries deemed high risk are being forced to hotel quarantine for 14 days.
The new variant is concerning. It moved from being a variant of investigation to a variant of concern within the space of 24 hours.
Urgent genomic sequencing is currently underway to determine if 2 passengers who arrived into New South Wales and have since tested positive to COVID have the new variant. A case in Howard Springs is also under investigation. Around 70 people across Victoria and New South Wales are now completing hotel quarantine after arriving from the countries of concern.
It's going to be impossible to keep out, I imagine. So it's still important to buy time, and we're doing exactly that.
It took the Delta variant just 3 weeks to reach 53 countries, and there's early evidence Omicron is far more transmissible. Passengers landing today happy to self-quarantine for 3 days as a precaution.
I think it's fair enough. It's a small consequence we have to deal with, but it's for the benefit of everyone.
Health authorities admit there is still so much more to find out about this new variant, and particularly how transmissible it is, as well as how effective our vaccines are to it. So we will just have to wait and see.
Meanwhile, across the globe, a growing number of countries have recorded their first positive Omicron cases, including Germany, Italy and the United Kingdom. Here's US correspondent Alison Petrowski.
As the UK confirmed their first Omicron cases, Prime Minister Boris Johnson announced a raft of new measures. Everyone entering the UK must take a PCR test on day 2 of their arrival and isolate until they have a negative result. Contacts of anyone who tests positive will have to isolate for 10 days, even if they're fully vaccinated. And also, he announced a tightening up of the indoor mask rules. The UK Prime Minister trying to balance caution and urgency. He insists that these measures are temporary and that he would review them in 3 weeks.
We need to slow down the seeding of this variant in our country. We need to buy time for our scientists to understand exactly what we're dealing with, and for us to get more people vaccinated.
Israel also installing a stopgap, shutting their borders to foreigners for the next fortnight. Here in the United States, there are no known cases of Omicron yet, but officials say that's unlikely to last.
Do you believe that Omicron is already here in the U.S., likely?
I would not be surprised if it is. When you have a virus like this, it almost invariably is ultimately going to go essentially all over.
Dr. Anthony Fauci says we're probably 2 to 3 weeks away from finding out if our current vaccines are effective against this new strain. A lot of trepidation here in the US. The US holds the unfortunate title of the most COVID deaths so far, 777,000 cases, and that number is still climbing.
And we have some breaking news from Sydney on this very topic. New South Wales Health has just confirmed that 2 overseas passengers who arrived from Africa last night, that both of those passengers have the Omicron variant of COVID-19. And we'll, of course, have more on that developing situation coming up for you in 9 News tonight at 6 o'clock. But moving on to other news, and a frightening siege situation has unfolded in the quiet fishing town of Windang in the Illawarra region of New South Wales. A masked man armed with 2 guns opened fire at cars before barricading himself in a shop. Ruth Wynne-Williams has more.
Police are right now focusing on this family home in Windang. We are around 2 blocks from where a masked man went on a frightening rampage around 9:30 this morning. Dressed in black, the man was seen stalking the main street of this small town. He fires off several shots, all in front of dozens of terrified witnesses.
Wait, what the f*** is going on? There's a gun.
The man holed himself up inside a local dive shop. We know a number of staff members were inside. He stayed there for a short time before surrendering to police.
There were 2 employees of the dive shop. One of them got out. He was able to engage police and provide them with valuable information. The second employee was in there and he was later released to police.
Nobody was hurt in this daylight rampage, but the incident did spark bomb fears, shutting the suburb down for several hours. The 40-year-old who allegedly carried out this rampage is right now in the custody of police.
Melbourne police are hunting a driver who struck a man in Melbourne's inner east overnight. The 25-year-old victim was hit in Abbotsford just after 12:30 and he was taken to hospital. Anyone who recognises the car from CCTV should call Crime Stoppers. Well, Perth's inner east is smothered in smoke after a linen factory went up in flames this morning. The blaze at the Alexander Road factory in Belmont started at 6:30. 40 firefighters were called to the scene to stop the inferno spreading to nearby buildings. It has now been contained, but nearby residents have been told to close their windows and doors due to the poor air quality. Scott Morrison has pledged tougher action to tackle online abuse and for social media companies to unmask anonymous trolls. Political editor Chris Uhlmann has more.
For a few years now, Scott Morrison has been pretty strident about the many sins of the social media giants, and the government has acted to set up an e-safety commissioner and passing online safety laws, while the Prime Minister has routinely called for global action. Today he stepped it up a notch, pledging laws to force the social media titans to unmask online trolls and make the companies responsible for any abuse.
The online world shouldn't be a Wild West where bots and bigots and trolls and others can just anonymously going around and harm people and hurt people, harass them and bully them and sledge them.
The planned law would make social media companies liable for defamatory statements made on their platforms, allow victims to get the comments removed or demand the troll be identified. If that didn't happen, a court could order disclosure and the Commonwealth could intervene in disputes where it sees a public interest.
They need to make it safe. And if they won't, we will make them.
Anthony Albanese agrees with the sentiment but has some concerns.
Domestic controls have limitations for what is a global industry.
With only 1 week left in the parliamentary sitting year, the Prime Minister will be hoping this one is better than the last, where coalition senators and MPs derailed the government's agenda.
This is a weak Prime Minister leading a government that has no direction for today, let alone a plan for tomorrow.
For 3 years we've had a very strong and focused and united team that has ensured that we've been able to lead Australia through one of the most difficult periods this country has known.
That said, it's a fair bet that Scott Morrison will be breathing a small sigh of relief when Parliament rises on Thursday afternoon.
The New South Wales Police Force will send a contingent of 15 officers to the Solomon Islands following a request from the federal government. The team from the riot squad will help boost the support already being provided by ADF troops. After days of violence in the capital, 3 people have been found dead and more than 100 arrested. A man has had his throat cut in a knife attack outside popular Adelaide nightclub Zhivago. Witnesses saw the 21-year-old victim bleeding in line around 12:30 this morning. The alleged attacker fled and dumped his weapon before being arrested in a nearby convenience store. The 20-year-old accused will now face court on charges of attempted murder. Fires in North Queensland had their hands full today with a blaze tearing through the top story of a Cairns quarantine hotel. 163 guests were evacuated, all of whom were in isolation after returning from overseas. Police have charged a woman with arson. She will appear in court tomorrow. Mourners have turned out en masse to pay tribute to a Melbourne father who was killed in a hit run. Lana Murphy was there.
Almost 3 weeks after he was killed in an horrific hit run, father of 4 Timmy Rake is still front of mind for those who knew and loved him. Almost 200 people today turning out for a motorcade in his honour. Leading the pack, Timmy's wife, son and 5-year-old little girl.
We want these guys to go home to their families. We just don't want them to be in the position that we are now.
It's the first time they've spoken since the young grandfather was killed by a hit-run driver in Carrum Downs earlier this month. He was struck while setting up traffic cones, then abandoned by a heartless motorist.
He looked at Timmy after it happened and walked off. What sort of person does that?
He was like a hero to everyone. in a way.
Timmy's loved ones today trying to drive change in his name. Among the sea of high vis and flashing signs, the father of 4 was in the spotlight, as colleagues and strangers created a convoy from Dandenong to Beaconsfield. They were flanked by police as they crawled down the Princes Highway from 8 a.m. Tears flowing as they marked a minute's silence. Timmy's son then joining the haka. Amongst the crowd, the 44-year-old's colleague Sean Kilmartin, who was also struck by the killer driver. His leg snapped in half, the father of 4 now pledging to get back to work within months.
Just slow down, it's not hard, simple.
We'd have what's referred to as a near miss pretty much once a week.
Those here today hoping this sparks much needed change in the industry and sends a strong message to drivers on the road.